Good evening from central London, and today we're going to be talking about landlords facing a shocking deadline of 2028 to meet new EPC C standards deadline. And of course, we'll be talking about in detail the consultation proposals and what this means for landlords and tenants. If some of you have been following me, you know that over the course of a few years, there's been a lot of talk about EPC standards being improved. Right now, under a new Labour government, we have Ed Miliband moving this reform quite quickly. So we're going to be reviewing as to how landlords are reacting, what landlords could be doing right now, and also what they should be sort of saving to be able to meet these new standards. Last year, we had talked about this being kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back with all the other regulations that are happening. But is it really that much of a bad news? Well, in the next few minutes, we'll be sharing that. So we're talking about the consultation, of course, and this is for landlords to meet the EPC of at least C standard. So we've got the 7th February, the UK government published a consultation on changes to the minimum energy efficiency standard in domestic private rented sector. Just in case you're not familiar as to what an EPC is and you're quite new to the rental market, an EPC is an energy performance certificate, and you should be providing this to a tenant or a renter before they even make a decision on whether they want to rent the property. Typically, the certificate is valid for around about 10 years, and this certificate shows how much kind of the heating or how well insulated the property is. And my understanding from the government is this is to tackle fuel poverty. The Labour government is now consulting on proposals to require landlords in the domestic, that's in the PRS, private rented sector, to meet EPC C by 2028 for new tenancies and 2030 for existing tenancies. So the consultation includes proposals for transitional arrangements to the new standards, an increased cost cap, and a new affordability exemption, and applying to MEAS to short lets. The big deal with the metrics being changed is it's more uncertainty, and you won't have that certainty until next year, 2026. So a lot of landlords are in a position and thinking, you know what, I have a bit of money saved up right now. I'm just going to get ahead of all of this and upgrade my EPC. Well, no, that wouldn't be a sensible thing to do because the metrics are now being changed and you don't know what that's going to be. So you can shed out thousands of pounds now, think, okay, I'm safe. And then those metrics are so much stricter and are completely different to what they are right now. And then you end up having an EPC that doesn't meet the standards with the new metrics that they put through, which isn't going to be until 2026. Fabric performance. This metric would assess insulation, draft proofing, and double glazing. Smart readiness. The metric would also assess the building's ability to take advantage of flexible energy. For example, solar panels, batteries, and smart meters. Heating system. The metric would rank different heating systems based on environmental impact, efficiency, and how well they align with achieving net zero emission goals. Now, there is a cost exception. Currently, landlords are required to spend £3,500, including VAT, attempting to meet EPCE. The previous government was increased to £10,000, but Labour felt that this was not enough. Proposes to increase the cost cap to £15,000. This cost cap will not automatically rise with inflation. So what do you think? Landlords have a spare 15 grand around? Well, another conversation would be, of course, as to what support is out there for landlords. And I didn't see much. There are some talks of we have boiler upgrade schemes up to 7.5 grand for heating pumps, energy company obligation, funding for insulation and heating, local authority grants. Some councils offer interest-free loans or subsidized. Green mortgage and energy efficiency loans. Any questions, Guy? I know that's a mouthful. Would be interesting to find out what your thoughts are on this new consultation by the Labour government. And this is why it's so important for tenants to also be aware of this, because this is only going to impact landlords, right? This is something that's going to impact all stakeholders, including tenants. Every time the government interferes with the market, there is always an impact, cause and effect. For those who plan to carry out out the necessary work. 17% expect to use their savings. 17%, almost a fifth. 41% via rent increases. That's a big number. For renters and tenants and lobbies and organizations to say that there is no way that the rents are going to increase at the back of this is crazy. Let's see what Ed Miliband on a video thinks about this in an interview with the BBC.
Okay, a little early this morning, we spoke to Ben Beadley, who's Chief Executive of the National Residential Landlords Association, rather long title, but he gave us a couple of numbers. He said that he thought the cost of what you're proposing would be £20 billion for the sector. He said that there was no way it could be done in any practical sense in less than 10 years. And he was very clear that the costs, in the absence of substantial government, a proportion of that, substantial proportion of that, not smaller grants being made by the government, the costs would be passed on, rents would be higher. He made those points, 3 points, very clearly.
I'm bound to say, Charlie, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, you know, he's representing landlords. Half of landlords do a good job and have these standards. Half of them don't. It's his job to lobby for landlords. But this government isn't about lobbying. It's about doing the right thing for the country.
You know, when we take that and we see the surveys that we've just reviewed with regards to landlords actually saying, yeah, the way we plan to actually cover these costs, 41% have responded that it will be based on this rent increase. We're going to look at the timelines for this. 2026 is when they're going to have a clearer picture from the consultations and actually let people know, or let landlords know, what metrics are actually going to be used to roll this out and how the new EPCs are going to be assessed in 2026. That being said, in 2028, they want to all new tenancies. These are new tenancies in 2028 to meet the new EPC standards of C. This is 2028. However, for those tenancies that already have tenants in there that are not new, they're going to give them a little bit more space until 2030. So 2030 is the real deadline for everyone. The EPC consultation proposed that short-term lets, generally defined as properties occupied for less than 31 days, should be required to have an EPC at the point of occupation. Short lets are currently exempt from requirement to have an EPC, so long as the occupier is not responsible for meeting the cost of the energy. And that makes sense, right? I mean, if the occupier doesn't have to meet the cost of energy, then why would you have to provide an EPC? The main justification for this proposal is that the government is concerned that private rented sector landlords would convert private rented sector properties to short-term lets in order to avoid the new MEES standards. Okay, so this is a strategic move from the government as opposed to it making sense for current renters, which is crazy. So they are kind of playing chess here, whereby they don't want to leave room for landlords to have options on the table on whether long-term rental continues to be a good option for them. If you're a renter, a landlord, let me know what your thoughts are on that. Research, the EPC and energy efficiency platform developed for landlords reveals how many EPC points landlords can expect and add by carrying out some common energy efficiency. So here are some easy wins, okay? Adding a hot water cylinder installation adds an average of plus 1.7 points. Installing low energy lighting adds an average of plus 1.1. Alternative energy is one way of adding a lot of EPC points with solar panels, adding an average of 9.91 points for roof insulation, 9.9 points, and this is most effective measure when it comes to improving EPC scores. It might sound counterintuitive, but adding the most sustainable features to a home isn't always the best way to add points and therefore improve an EPC rating. For example, a biomass boiler is often said to be the most eco-friendly way to heating a home, but in terms of EPC points, they don't score as highly as more traditional heating methods. But if you took anything away from this, it will be that article in terms of what improvements you make to increase the points of your EPC. And that doesn't always equal to being the most energy efficient. It is the end of an era. And we're coming into what we call the new world. It's a new era, and you either adapt or get out. That's just the reality of it. I know a lot of landlords that are not getting out. A lot of landlords that are restructuring may have to sell a couple of properties that are not performing as well, had them in the wrong structure, putting it now in a proper legal structure so it makes sense financially, and also, taking all these figures into consideration. Clearly, the government is encouraging landlords to just make the changes now. Don't wait. There is incentives there. You won't need to abide by the new methodology. Just crack on and do it. If we look at what happened in recent years, a lot of landlords actually did that and said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And then the government scrapped their plans. Now, a lot of landlords are actually optimistic that the government's not going to follow this through. They're going to scrap those plans. And so a lot of landlords are thinking, actually, I'm going to stay put. I'm going to bet that they're going to scrap this, and then I'm not going to spend 10, 15 grand doing works that are no longer needed, just like what happened a few years ago. Then there are those other landlords that say, well, actually, no, I will do this because it's in my best interest. And, if it doesn't go through, well, it doesn't. We do have a webinar for landlords. It's completely free. And we will be diving slightly on this, but more so on the regulations and the overall market. It will be on the description with the link. Make sure you do register. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your time.